Hi, how are you guys? So this is a video because you've been having such fabulous, fabulous discussions as of late. We just need to make up a little time, and this is going to cover some of our content about our first wave of immigration, and then we're going to talk about what happens with urbanization and gang life, especially with the Irish in class together, because we are going to watch a little bit of a film that talks about that. So when we talk about this first wave of immigration coming to the United States, we know that it is going to perfectly coincide with the first industrial revolution. And again, as we talked about, that is not a coincidence. You would not have people coming in the numbers they are coming in if there were not jobs for them, right? So we said it's like this triangle that keeps growing off of each other. You have more industrialization, which attracts more immigrants. More immigrants come in, cities get bigger. Cities get bigger, more people form factories in them, industrialization gets bigger, right? So it just keeps growing off of each other. So most historians are going to say that America's, quote, first wave of immigration is actually from like the 1810s to the 1860s. And that's actually kind of outdated if you think about it today to talk about like first wave, second wave, third wave, because we know immigration never stops in America. And now we continue to have all these different people who come in seeking the same thing, seeking a better life. And that's essential, that opportunity that we talked about in the very beginning of the year. You don't move, you don't go through all that trouble, you don't make large changes in your life unless you are seeing something bigger. And we have to remember that when we talk about things like refugees who are coming, this isn't a choice often. This isn't something that you think, oh, I'm going to decide to come here to another country. Oftentimes this is so out of necessity. You are not taking on a terrible journey and all these challenges and economic hardship if you think you can stand a better chance in your own country. For so many people, this is literally not a choice. So we have to remember that today when we talk about politics surrounding refugee acceptance and things like that. So this first wave of immigration, even though there's going to be lots of different people involved, the two groups that dominate are going to be the Irish and the Germans. And as I said, we're going to talk about the Irish in class more. And when we discuss bigger kind of trends, we're talking mostly people in Northern Europe and in Western Europe. So these are going to be different groups, such as like some Swedes, you have more English people coming in Northern Europe, and then Western Europe you have Germany and some other countries in that region. So keep in mind a lot of our Eastern Europeans and Southern Europeans, people who are Polish, Czechoslovakian, Italian, Greek, they are not coming until later, okay? So that second wave is going to be more after the Civil War, 1880s, well into the 1900s, till the 1920s. When we discuss immigration, we're talking about something very big called the push-pull model. So the pushes are the reasons you are leaving your country, right? What are the reasons that are pushing you out of your country? And in this case, we know for both the Irish and the Germans, it's going to be things like religious persecution, especially for the Irish for being Catholic. It is going to be the potato famine, of course, for the Irish. In general, for a lot of groups, things like overpopulation. We know that Europe is so crowded, right? And overpopulation isn't just physical. It's not having enough jobs. It's sometimes not having enough partners to marry and start a family with, right? All these things, overcrowding, unemployment, lack of opportunity, economic depression, and an instability politically of a country. And you're going to see a lot of nation making going on in Europe right now, and this of course leads to a lot of instability there. So people are seeing this in Europe and they say, okay, where can I go? What offers a better opportunity? And for so many people, just increasing over time, this is going to be America, right? And we know what we're going to be talking about in classes. You look at your own immigration stories. This is truly the story of us, right? That we are all immigrants. And something that I find fantastic that I just learned about was, everyone makes fun of Americans for always smiling and showing their teeth, like so much. Other countries don't do it, and we are always like flashing our mouths and smiling at everybody. And I just found out, it's so interesting that that is a cultural practice in our country that many agree comes from the fact that we always spoke different languages. So how do you communicate with people who don't speak your language? Very often you like use your facial expressions. You smile, you try to like use hand motions, and a lot of Americans talk with their hands, a lot of Americans smile a lot. And the frequency of our smiling may come historically from the fact that we were always trying to communicate with people and show pleasure, show happiness, show like, oh, hi, nice to meet you, to groups whose languages we didn't speak. So the next time someone British makes fun of you for smiling so much, you can share that story with them. So the pushes are going to be reasons you are leaving. Of course, as you can imagine, the pulls are what is bringing you into this country, right? What is attracting you to come here? And we know America right now is a good economy. It doesn't mean you're going to be treated well. It doesn't mean you're going to get insurance and well paid, but you have job opportunities for people, right? Tons of them. Cities are booming with them, and something we're going to talk about is how most immigrants are too poor to travel to farmland, right? To travel inside the United States, to the Midwest, to other places. So you stay in those cities because you cannot afford the transportation and what it would cost to go elsewhere. Religious freedom, it's going to be huge. Even though we have never quite perfected it, we have way more religious freedom than a lot of these spots in Europe right now, especially for the group like the Irish. We have more political stability, even though we are not perfect. We have a democracy. We already have a diverse population. You're not going to be sticking out. We are a country of immigrants, right? And we physically have a lot of space and a lot of land, which we know Europe has historically not had for a long, long time. So something we're going to talk about is what is the result when people come in and you have these huge numbers of people, and something we still struggle with today is this really tough nativism. And something you and I are going to discuss is how deeply hypocritical this nativism is, because if we look back far enough, unless you are 100% Native American, we are all immigrants, right? That's just everybody's story. So you're going to see a lot of the compounded effects that come from so many immigrants coming at once lead to a lot of this nativism. So again, where it says in that immigration section 2 part, Irish immigration, skip that for now, we're going to get back to it, and go to where the Germans are. The Germans are going to not be dealing with that same sense of like dire, I will not survive, as the Irish are with the potato famine, literally millions of people dying. Doesn't mean things are good in Germany, it's just not quite the same level, right? So Germans are going to be leaving Germany for different reasons. They're seeking a more stable country because their country is not that stable politically at the moment. Lots of overcrowding in Germany. You have a failed revolution that happens, economic depression, and this is the big, big difference. They are going to be mostly middle class and Protestant, and they are not Catholic, and that is going to be a huge, huge distinction between how they are treated in this new country and how the Irish are treated. And think about it. The Germans are coming over with many different skill sets, right? A lot of them are brewers, and you could go to certain areas. I lived in Chicago in an area called Brewers Row. Trust me, it was in an apartment building. I was not living in a brewer's mansion. But these houses in the neighborhood were just insane. And that shows us how they're coming with wealth, they're coming with skills. Yeah, you're going to welcome somebody like that more than you would like a destitutely poor Irishman, right, who doesn't have any skills perhaps in brewing or business making. So they're more readily accepted. They do not face the same discrimination, and that's going to be a very distinct thing to talk about when we discuss the treatment of the Irish versus other groups. And then two, we're going to talk later on in the second wave, etc., about people who come in who are poor, who do not have skills perhaps that people think we need in America, and definitely you are treated as less than because of it. So with the rapid immigrant arrivals, our population growth, of course, just like skyrockets, and cities expand at an alarming rate. We cannot keep up. We're going to talk about tenement housing later on, what that looks like. They are dirty, they are crowded, they are complete fire hazards. You don't really have steel yet. So most of these structures are made from wood, and they are literally tinder boxes waiting to go up in flame. Disease is spreading so quickly. I just went to the Tenement House Museum in New York City, and they discussed how you do not have running water in any apartments, any tenements in New York City by law until like 1901, and that's when the law is passed, and that doesn't really go into effect till like 1907. So you have an entire building of people sharing the same outhouse. You have people who do not have running water getting pails of water. You have people using kerosene lamps. You don't have electricity yet. This is fire hazardous. This is just dense for disease, for vermin, for rats. Lots of people had dogs, not for like, oh, cute, I have a dog reason, but because it's literally going to catch and kill rats and other animals that would make their way into your tenement house. So the crowded factor, the filth factor is enormous, and oftentimes you would have multiple families living in just one tenement, one apartment. So there are some early reform attempts to clean this up, but you and I won't really see that happen until the progressive era in the 1900s. And of course, we're going to talk about the very famous book that is put together, mostly photographs by Jacob Riis. how the other half lives. I know you know it. You got it. And keep in mind too, like the people who are controlling the wealth are going to be your 1% in cities. They don't care about immigrants. They're not even really seeing them because you would never step foot in those neighborhoods, right? So there's a big gap between that care and what's visible, and we still deal with that today, right? We know that here in Buffalo. Industrialization just gets absolutely enormous, and we're going to have what we call the rise of the urban working class. Today, you and I might describe this as blue-collar workers. So think about it. If you are working in a bank, you're often wearing a suit, and that would be what we would call a white-collar job, right? Blue-collar workers comes from the fact that you're often wearing like that industrial uniform or jumpsuit, and it was often blue. And that's going to be, working with your hands, getting often an hourly wage instead of a salary. We're going to see this nomenclature continue. You're going to see when women go into the workforce down the road, after World War II, people called the jobs for women pink-collar jobs. Yeah, not a great nickname there. With terrible conditions in the workplace, the factories, think about the Lowell girls, think about people's health, think about all this stuff. Then think about all these immigrants coming in and fierce competition for jobs. And then, of course, thank you, Andrew Jackson, the Panic of 1837. You have workers put in a tough spot. And from this tough spot, we are going to see the very beginning of what we know today as our labor movement. So workers that start to think about their rights, that start to team together, that start to unionize, that start to protest fire hazardous conditions, that start to say, wait a second, if I'm injured on the job, you should be paying me something, not firing me because it was your machinery that did this, right? So we're going to see that happen down the road, and of course it works when you have strength in numbers. If one of you doesn't show up to school, that's just somebody who is absent. If all of you don't show up to school together to make a point, someone is going to have to listen, right? So you needed those strength in numbers as workers for things to actually be effective, and we're going to see that more and more down the road. It begins to work as people do this. President Van Buren is going to be the first to say, hey, okay, we need a 10-hour workday. I want you to stop and think about it. If a 10-hour workday is a law that's seen as an improvement at that time, think about what that says about workers' rights. So we're going to leave that there for now. We're going to get a lot into workers' rights down the road, and we will fill in and talk about what the experience of the Irish is in class and also what's going on with the gangs, especially the gangs of New York. All right, you guys, see you later. I don't know why I just winked. What was that?